Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I am excited to introduce you to Alison. She is a nutritional therapy practitioner and she just wrote an amazing cookbook that's called the Paleo Gut Healing Cookbook. And she's here to tell us all about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Alison.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, yes. I know it's so first of all, you're just worked so hard on creating this book and put it out there in the world. And I know how much goes into that. So we definitely want to hear what's in the book, but we also want to know you and what inspired you to write this book and to do what you do. So tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm sure like so many of your listeners, inspired by your support and journey can relate, but essentially, I burned out years and years ago by doing all the things, working really hard and trying to be a perfectionist at everything. And ultimately my health just started declining. And I started going through the traditional routes, endocrinologist, my hair was falling out, my gut was a mess. I had just gotten off the birth control pill and I didn't really know where to turn. I knew there was a history of autoimmunity in my family and all sorts of health issues, but I didn't know if that's what was happening with me or what was happening. And after years of getting tossed around to different doctors with no answers, I finally went to a naturopath and then functional medicine doctors who found that I had Hashimoto's autoimmune disease. And I had already known that I had PCOS and other issues with my menstrual cycle, like hormonal imbalances. So there was that fun added in as well. Various gut issues like SIBO and parasites and all the rest. So that was definitely years and years worth of just trying to figure it all out. And I'm actually picturing one of your Instagram posts where you had the healing journey of up, down, up, down. It's not just cool, you get your diagnosis and you're off to the races. It's oh, we need to find out why you have this and why, and keep digging deeper. And so throughout all of that, throughout even just figuring out something was going on with me and me really wanting to be proactive because I realized I wasn't getting many answers elsewhere, I started playing around with food and nutrition and figuring this has to be a big piece to it. What we put in our bodies 3 times a day has to have something to do with this. Imagine, right? It's so funny because it's so foreign to our modern day life to kind of think that. And then it's well, no, we are putting something in our body 3 times a day. So what is it? So I just started cooking and finding recipes and making up my own recipes, food that I loved because as a fellow New Yorker, I'm such a foodie and I loved going out to restaurants. And when I started seeing I was getting food sensitivities and I was having all these issues and I couldn't keep up anymore, I really had to cook at home in my tiny little New York City apartment. And I started my blog, foodbymarras.com, where I was just going gluten-free, then messing around with dairy-free. And it was just kind of an evolution of me really landing more in the paleo diet area, even using AIP for my autoimmune disease, which is the autoimmune protocol, which we could talk about too. And that's kind of how everything came to be. I was lucky enough with food plus thyroid medication and working with practitioners and really managing my stress and lifestyle, which I know you are an expert about. That was a big deal. I was able to put my Hashimoto's into remission. I was able to get pregnant. I have a 2-year-old. Yeah. So my life totally changed because of this being the catalyst. And so I wanted to really demystify gut healing and really make it more approachable and simple, which is what it should always be. I think we overcomplicate things. And that's my hope with the book, is to just make it more fun and doable for people.
Show us your book.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yay. This is it. Oh That's my Italian wedding soup. And I got lots of recipes. I have 75.
So you have colored pictures in there too, it looks like.
Oh yeah. I've got lots of pictures. Wow. That was part of on my blog, my creative outlet is food photography. So I love cooking and taking photos.
Oh my gosh. It makes such a difference, because when you're looking at looking at a book with recipes, I'm so visual. So I kind of need that to know, like, okay, how is this going to look? Or is it sort of going to look once I get through the recipe?
Totally. You need that like aftershock.
Yeah, I do. I don't know how many listeners are like that, but the visual really motivates me, and the in color, like that. And I know how hard it is to not only just come up with the recipes, but then like fine tune exactly how much of this and that, because I've done some recipe development myself too. And it's a lot to go through all of that and to test it and then consider all of the variations, because what you're doing here, it's brilliant and it's simple at the same time, which is to say, hey, what's considered paleo is, a lot of it, as you mentioned, is avoiding gluten and dairy. So it's essentially a gluten-free, dairy-free. Paleo usually is also sugar-free, organic, and like sometimes grain-free or very few grains, right?
Exactly.
So you're having to develop these recipes with those, meeting those criteria, but also taking into account, that we're each individuals. Is that something they'll find in the book? Is like, here's where you can individualize it?
Absolutely. So I'm such a cheerleader for bioindividuality and saying, hey, here's what the paleo template is. And I try to refer to these diets as templates because that's really what they are. We can start to tinker around and play by the template rules, so to speak, but then really tune into our own body and customize, because paleo diet is also, they talk a lot about ancestral eating and the way that our great grandparents ate before processed food kind of had its way with us, right? Because it's really about getting back to nature and eating things that are from nature and as intended and not so processed and all the things. So that can look a little bit different for everybody, depending on your culture, where your family's from. You might not need to give up all grains or all legumes or things like that. So I just try to say, hey, try this, see how you feel. Oftentimes people feel amazing, more energy, better digestion, all the things. And then really start to say like, okay, can I have this once or twice a week? Can I have, and really customize, because that's what worked for me. I'm multicultural. My mom's Hispanic. My dad is like Irish and English. So I bring a lot of my family favorites. And then my husband is Greek. So I tried to kind of recreate a lot of the foods that we loved and missed. And I think that's always a big issue for people when they're trying this. They're like, yeah, but I miss my whatever, like pasta night or
even you
whatever.
Just wedding soup. That's that.
Exactly.
Right? Ooh,
exactly. Things that you love, that it's like, wait, how do I make that gluten-free, dairy-free, paleo, whatever? And so that's something that I really love to do with the recipes. So they're all things you might recognize, but I made them paleo friendly. And you're not, if my husband, who doesn't have to eat this way, can't tell, like, you're not going to be able to tell, trust me. So
it tastes good. It's not like they miss some part of it.
Exactly. And like cheese is always a big one. Like, oh my goodness, like I miss cheese. So I've got like so many cheese sauces that you can even have. I have lots of nut free, like AIP is nut free. So that's usually a big allergen and that can be an issue for some people. So like cauliflower and coconut cream, and I've got a cheese sauce. It's ridiculous what you can do when you mess around enough.
I would like some of that right now.
Yes. I wish I could deliver it to you.
It's true, because, I, in my work, and this is, now I'm 21 years in as a naturopathic doctor, and I was researching food sensitivities back more than that when I was still training. It became a huge interest of mine because of my history with allergies and food sensitivities. So I tried every kind of diet and every kind of food sensitivity test. And way back then, I figured out I needed to avoid gluten and dairy. So this is, my daughter is 19, and I think I really went gluten-free, dairy-free when I had her.
Wow.
19 years ago, I was figuring this out.
And it was much harder back then, I'm sure.
We didn't even have the term paleo really then, or any resources. So I just, really get what you've been through, because I went that path myself too as a naturopathic doctor, and to then be able to ask the question, how best to help help patients, help viewers, help readers to be able to do the same thing. Because I mean, for you and I, it like became our life, but for other people, it doesn't have to become your life to eat this way. We want to make it easy for you, right? And that's why I love, the idea of your book, is because you're saying, hey, you guys don't have to do all the work of figuring out what to make. You can just use my book as a resource.
Totally. Exactly. That is the idea. And luckily there's so many great blogs and resources now that I'm sure you would have killed to have 20 years ago, because even when I started, I don't know, what was that, 7 or 8 years ago at this point, just tinkering around, it still felt like, wait, but how can I have this? And how can I? So I think we just come across the least resistance we can have with this stuff, the more compliant we can be, the more joy we can bring to it, and the less stress. Because I've found that when we're so stressed out over every single bite that we put into our mouths, whether it's because we've heard it's bad for us, or we know, like, no, when I eat this thing, I feel sick, I have a flare up, whatever it is, now it's more complicated than just eating or not eating the thing. It's now we're fearing it. We're feeling really stressed out about it. So we're then not going to be able to digest if we're in a sympathetic state and freaking out before we even eat. So that's what I'd like to do, is like, how can we have fun with this? How can we just kind of have our cake and eat it too, to the best of our abilities? So that's what I'm hoping comes across.
It's so true. I mean, because if here we are already stressed, and then if we stress out about our diet change, now we're just still in the cycle of stress, which is what causes so many of the gut issues, the inability to digest food, like you're mentioning, the leaky gut, the imbalanced gut bacteria that end up creating not only the gut issues, but the autoimmunity. So let's talk a little bit more about all of that, because I think, maybe some listeners might be thinking, well, how do I know if I need to follow a gluten-free, dairy-free, paleo diet? How do I know that? Or what can I expect, is going to change by doing that? So tell us a little more about, what you tell people.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, I mean, especially if I'm working with clients or just, talking to people about this kind of stuff, I always say, like, you're not going to know until you try. So there's so many reasons. If you're listening to this podcast and you suffer with some sort of symptoms of fatigue and burnout, autoimmunity, whatever is going on for you, it is your health. It is worth a try to just return back to nature. And that's what I feel like this is really doing. That's what I describe the paleo diet as doing. So even if you just started trying it here and there, integrating meals in, or really committing and saying, hey, for the next 30 days, I'm going to try this. What's so great about it is you're kind of just removing the noise. And so many times, if we've grown up on the standard American diet, we're so used to the same foods. We're just such creatures of habits, right? So we like our certain foods. We buy them every week. We keep eating them. And so when there's so much noise and you have so many symptoms and so many things going on, it's really hard to detangle all of that. Yeah. And what I find is, by at least trying for about 30 days and seeing how you feel, really cleaning things out, get rid of the processed food, get rid of the refined sugar, all the things that are hard to digest, like the grains, the legumes. Again, it might not be permanent that you give them up. It's just to relieve the body of some initial inflammation. So, and definitely with gluten and dairy, I always tell people that is just very well known for being, inflammatory, at least because of the quality that we tend to have, especially with like poor quality dairy, I find. And I think a lot of people generally feel better when they go gluten-free and dairy-free. And so just see how it feels. Usually people will already know, like, skin changes. So many people are like, oh yeah, I had a rash. I just thought I was always going to have that. Sometimes people don't even realize that something is a symptom until it's like, oh, that went away. I thought I was stuck with that. People will often tell me with dairy too, like, oh, I don't clear my throat anymore. That happened to me. I grew up just always clearing my throat all the time and thought it was like, I don't know, a tick. This is just what I do.
You just like figure it's going to be there forever.
I can't even tell you, Doni, like years into the paleo diet, and I was like, I don't do that anymore. I totally forgot that I did that. I was around a family member that happens to do it all. And I'm like, oh, it was the dairy. Like, it hit me. I was like, oh, upper GI. It was like mucus causing, like that's what was going on. So it's so funny. You might not even realize things that can get better and improve and change when you remove these things that are causing inflammation in the body.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've done, I don't even know, thousands and thousands of food sensitivity tests on patients. And I agree with you. The two most common food sensitivities are gluten and dairy.
Yep.
And so if you're just thinking, hey, where do I begin? It's a pretty good, and I think I'm curious what your opinion is, but I think it's because in our American diet anyway, and probably other places in the world too, it's so easy for our diet to become mostly gluten and dairy. If you think about it, right? Like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what are we eating? We're eating various forms of something made from wheat that essentially has gluten in it, or various forms of dairy, like milk and cheese and yogurt. And it's like, next thing, if you look at your diet and you're like, wait a minute, all I'm eating is gluten and dairy, at the very least, we could figure, let me just create some variety in my diet, right?
Exactly. Just like challenge yourself to try something new, try more whole foods. That was a big deal that I definitely came to realize. The standard modern diet, like you're saying, it's all processed. They know, unfortunately, that we get very hooked on these things. They're hyper palatable foods. We will keep buying it. And so when you really say no to more packaged foods and you're cooking more and it doesn't, I think that a big thing is when we hear this is like, oh no, I don't have time for that. I need these convenience foods. I need these bars and snacks and this and that. Firstly, I want to say there's a lot more available these days. Like we've said, that there are like paleo, some beef sticks or whatever. There is a lot of that, but even still, I like to use that as little as possible, only in a pinch, only if I'm traveling, there's no other option. I really like to cook everything. And I've found ways to just keep things very minimal. I'll share with you. And if you guys check out my blog, but I have like a 20-minute meal prep that I do every weekend. I'm not sitting here cooking 4 hours on a weekend, even as a food writer and blogger. Like I don't want to do that. I want to spend time with my family. I want to do other things. So I make it very simple. It doesn't have to
take a lot of time, basically.
No. Once you just practice a little bit more, get into a rhythm and have a good system or like a meal plan, like I'm telling you, like these supports, you can get into a rhythm and see like, oh, this really doesn't need to be that hard. I didn't need to depend on toasts and cereals and bars and all these other things all the time that actually are making me feel terrible. I've got brain fog. I've got, all these different symptoms, digestive issues, no energy. I see so many people, and I'm sure you do too, with just terrible blood sugar balance, just hypoglycemia through the roof, crashing, needing a nap. It's like, because you're hooked on sugar. And that's the other thing besides gluten and dairy that is in everything. In some form or another.
Sneaky, right? Like you look, I always am like, you have to like look at your condiments, your salad dressing, like things where you wouldn't even, it's not just in like cupcakes and cookies. It sneaks in. So
people are always shocked. They're like, oh, it's in my almond milk. It's in my everything things that I thought were healthy. It's in everything. And it's by design. So we have to really take a look at these things, get back to just what's whole foods, right? Like just getting back to these things and simplifying. So the body, I always say, like, if you're reading a label and you can't process it up here in your brain, your digestion is not going to process it at all.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Like you want it to be like, food names of things you recognize that you can find in nature, that you're like, okay, this is, because there are some products like that are in a package that are maybe they say paleo on them. That's one of the, if you're shopping at the store, that's one trick I have is like, if it says paleo, it should be gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free.
Exactly.
Already. Right. And then, but there's some products, but even then sometimes you have to be careful because these other ingredients sneak in. And and you mentioned your 20-minute meal prep. I love that. And I'll put a link to your website for sure and your newsletter. So listeners can go and not only sign up to connect with you, but also to get this meal prep from you so they can really get a sense of like, how am I actually going to do this in my life?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great because that's honestly, I try to just make it as simple as possible. So it just gets done. And I find that meal prep is less about this. like being perfect with all these perfect Tupperwares and all these other things, because that's another thing that I don't think is one size fits all. There are plenty of people who don't like leftovers. They're kind of skeeved out by it. My husband is one of them. Like, I cannot just sit here and say, I'm going to make all our meals for the entire week. What am I going to want on Thursday? I don't know. So it's about simplifying and just saying, hey, I'm going to make some key components that I can transform throughout the week. And it's not going to take me a lot of time, and I can be flexible.
I love that.
And just like go, like stop stressing. That is one of the biggest issues that I see. Like you said, it really messes with our gut health. And if we're stressing over our food, it's like we're one step forward, 3 steps back here. It's just like this dance that we end up doing.
Something a lot of people don't know is that too much stress can actually create an abundance of health problems like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, anxiety, migraines, insomnia, even fertility issues. This is because high stress puts your adrenal glands on overload. They release cortisol and adrenaline, which controls your digestion, hormones, immune system, energy, focus, and even your emotional response. So how can you beat stress when you don't know where to start? That's why we have a free 7-day stress reset program. It's designed to help support weight loss, digestive healing, and hormone balancing. It includes support for integrating self-care, daily tips come to you by email and video, gluten-free, dairy-free meal plans, as well as grocery shopping lists, journal pages, and more. This free program will help you beat stress and put you on the path to wholeness in your body. Get your plan now for free at drdoni.com.
Well, and I see too, sometimes, patients who have significant symptoms, and we can talk more about the common symptoms, but where once we find out that they need to, I do a food panel, and then we see, say, for example, gluten or dairy, and we can also check for nuts and grains and other fruits and vegetables. Once we see that, then the thing is that if there's a stress about it, or if it's difficult for the person to avoid these foods, the concern for me is I don't want them to lose too much weight. Now, some people are doing this because they like to lose weight. And yes, you can. Oftentimes people will lose weight because not only from avoiding sugar, so now their blood sugar is better balanced, but oftentimes then we can also shift to more of a paleo diet. Often we'll have more like protein in each meal, which I love, instead of having carb heavy meals. So now if you're wanting to lose weight, you probably will. But if you're already thin and you don't need to lose more weight, or you're concerned about losing more weight, there's also a way to do this, right? So that we can keep your weight on, or even gain back weight that you lost unnecessarily.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tell me your input on that, Alison, if you're seeing that too.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I agree, because we're adding and I mentioned what a balanced paleo plate looks like in the cookbook, but essentially if you're having this like protein centric meal, but with lots of fruits and veggies in your diet, and good fat, and just clean water, and it's gut healing. So I definitely got broths and like probiotic rich foods like sauerkraut and whatever else. If that's what your plates are looking like, I think that, just like we're saying, if you're restoring your diet to nature, then I think that your body is going to follow suit, and you will find your healthy weight when you are doing this, and it's not stressful and it's joyful, and you're enjoying the food and you're showing up to your meals mindfully. That's absolutely what I see. That's what I've experienced. And I would also say, even like that inflammation weight that we're carrying, like you said, because of the sugar, because of the processed food, that now it's like, we don't have that. Our liver is not having to process all these terrible things we can't even pronounce on the back of the nutrition label, that our body can just work more as intended. And so everything just seems to get a bit better, and it all adds up. So yeah, that's absolutely what I see. And the other thing is that when we are so used to a certain way of eating, we eat the same things over and over again, which is not good for our gut. If you have a diverse kitchen, you have a diverse gut microbiome. And
I love that. Yes.
And so I'm not saying we need to go so, off the wall with trying new things every single week, but I just encourage people, try to eat seasonally. Pick up a vegetable you haven't tried. There's a million recipes online. You can find something. It doesn't have to be the same. Like, I grew up on potatoes, steamed broccoli, chicken, or rice, steamed broccoli, chicken, like kind of the same things over and over again.
It gets boring, right? You're like, here we go. We're going to eat the same foods again. Yeah.
Totally. Or like chicken, salmon, steak. I always hear that. It's like, well, I can't eat that all the time. When we're increasing protein intake and people are like, I can't just eat all of that. And it's like, there's about a million other things you can eat, right? Bison, elk, other fish that's out there, seafood you could include. And that's the other thing is like with the paleo diet and especially with the autoimmune protocol too, when we're eliminating things, we want to focus on what we can and are having and make sure that it is nutrient dense. So I talk about organ meats. That was a big part of my healing. I mentioned earlier, I lost so much of my hair in the beginning of my healing journey, and eating liver once a week, like really helped me out. And I know not everyone is like into that. I certainly wasn't, but I got on board. When you're about to go bald, you try anything. I got on board.
I don't care anymore. I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm going to pinch my nose and just try this. Of course you could take supplements.
Those nutrients,
Absolutely. My iron was not budging. Like with any supplements, I needed to just eat it because my digestion was so poor that I needed it in the most bioavailable way possible. And that's the power of food as medicine. So like focusing on what you are eating, can eat. Look at the do list more than you look. I'm sure you go through this when you're doing the food sensitivity panels too, and you show the person like, okay, you can't have any of this stuff anymore. Something that I do with yeah, it can feel a little overwhelming. And often because of leaky gut and food sensitivities going hand in hand, oftentimes it's what we're eating a lot of that we end up being sensitive to.
Yes.
So it's like we're taking away their coffee, we're taking away their gluten, their, dairy, all this stuff. And that's when I try to say like, hey, okay, this is what came up hot. Now your assignment is to go make an enormous list of all the foods you can have. And that's what you look at. That's what you focus on. Because if we're coming at it from a place of the positive side, the abundant side, like, I'm going to try all this stuff, it's less restrictive and demonizing foods. And that's not what we're here to do. We're just here to say like, this is what your body might thrive on versus, is sucking the life out of you.
Such a good point. The mindset makes a big difference, because if we're in that kind of like, feeling alone or feeling, like, oh, why is this happening to me? Or how am I going to do this? Or right. That's like all of that in that kind of like that mindset that almost is more stressed and more anxious and more fearful. And that mindset actually probably perpetuates the leaky gut and gut issues and food sensitivity. So just that's wonderful in your work that you're helping people to transform into this more like empowered state where you're saying, hey, let's look at this as this is something we can do to create a big shift in your life and your health, and it's doable. And I'm here to help you. That's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. You got it hit a head on the nail. That's exactly it.
Yeah. And that's beautiful because I think then, sometimes we need that. We need to kind of feel like someone's extending their hand and saying, I'm here for you. You can do this.
Absolutely.
I've got some recipes for you. I've got some, right?
Yeah. Like, here's how we make this doable. Yeah. And fun. And both you and me have lived it too. So I think that's what's good is like, we know the challenges, we know all that, but we've been at this for a while and we know what it can be. And so when I see someone that's just starting off, or they've been kind of like on and off diets and kind of waffling and just feeling like, I don't know what's right for me anymore. That's often where people will come to me. It's like, yeah, okay, I've tried Whole30. I've tried gluten-free. I don't know that anything's really working. And it's because we know diet is an enormous piece, but there's so many other pieces. And that's something else I talk about in the book is 10 strategies for gut healing that some of it has to do with food. So like eating broths and the way we cook our food and stuff like that can be really helpful because some people struggle with gas and bloating and all this other stuff. And oftentimes just in the way that we prepare the food, it might not even be the food itself. So I talk about things like that, but then I talk a lot about the lifestyle, the mindset, activating the vagus nerve for digestion, all the things that I wish I knew before I just kept, I fell into this where I was overcorrecting with diet, like learning about nutrition and becoming a practitioner. It was like, oh, nutrition is the key to everything. Diets are the key to everything, supplements and diets. And then I realized, well, I'm doing all that, but I'm not quite where I want to be. My labs are not quite there. I'm not feeling exactly the way I thought I would. Enter mindset. enter stress and burnout and all these other things that, when we just have a propensity towards this, and it's our, our attitude a little bit towards things, we have to really take a good look at that and realize, oh, I have to shift that. So yeah, that's a huge part of my work, because I just feel like they have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's amazing. And let's talk a little bit more about the gut health part of it, because I think, understanding what you've touched on a little bit, like how, here we are in our stressed lives, especially pandemic stress we've all just been through, and how that not only decreases our enzymes, it disrupts our intestinal cells. So now the undigested food can leak through and trigger the immune responses, which is, as you mentioned, why we start reacting to the foods we eat often. It's not this random that you're reacting to the food you eat often. It's because there's leakiness in your digestion.
Exactly. And so then it's leaking out.
We disrupt the gut bacteria. So then all of this, I think of it like a perfect storm. It just becomes this inflammatory storm in the gut. And a lot of people don't even have gut symptoms. I don't know if you see that too, where sometimes I ask and patients are like, oh, my digestion feels fine. I don't want to get bloating or heartburn. I feel fine. But they may have, as you mentioned, maybe sinus issues or autoimmunity of some type, or rashes.
Skin rashes,
weight gain or brain fog or fatigue, right? It's like, it shows up in other places in the body. It may show up in the digestion, but not always.
Yes, that's a great point.
So when your case, you figured out you had autoimmunity to your thyroid, which is the Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which, a lot of women have Hashimoto's. Sometimes it's not even tested, right? You have to be able to get your doctor to test for those thyroid antibodies to even know you have a Hashimoto's. And then if you do, the doctors aren't going to tell you about diet changes and how that's connected. But the studies show that gluten can trigger these thyroid antibodies.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, right? Like why, in your case, you started avoiding gluten along with these other things on the paleo diet, and lo and behold, the thyroid antibodies go away.
Exactly. TPO, especially, right? Like significantly reduces. I remember seeing doctors and they're like, well, if your TPO is still high and you're gluten-free, something else. And that's where we kept digging on gut health and parasites, all this other stuff, but also just stress. Like it was a lot of that, because fixing my body and getting into remission was my new thing to obsess over. I was just like, I got to fix this. Check. I'm doing all the things.
Now that.
Yes. So I feel like that is something I see a lot of, where people are like, but I'm doing it. I have to diet harder. I have to give up eggs more. I have to do more and more. And it's just like, no, maybe not. You did the diet. Let's feel good about that. And let's see what else is going on. So yes, that was definitely
not necessarily better. Like we're so willing to push ourselves hard, but sometimes we have to take a minute and be like, is it really about, because it really comes from a place of thinking we're not good enough or we're not doing it well enough, right? Like we have that critical voice saying, I must not be doing it right. But if we can let go of that and just look at it and say, instead of I'm not doing it right, what information didn't I have yet? What am I missing? How can I look at this differently that could shift it? That's what I'm hearing you say. Like we have to, right? Like just look at it differently and be like, okay, now what else does my body need me to do?
Absolutely. It's like you just keep turning over those rocks and seeing what else you have. I feel like once we can get the nutrition and the diet into a good place, like, okay, cool. I know how to meal prep for myself. I know some really good recipes. I don't feel deprived. I feel nourished. I feel like I'm getting good nutrients and I'm happy when I eat. It's like, okay, cool. How's your stress? How's this? How's that? Like, let's look elsewhere. Don't keep overcorrecting with diet. Cause I just find that really is a great way to just burn yourself out from eating this way and all the things. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
Oh my gosh. And by the way, I love your website is Food by Mars. Like sounds like the planet Mars.
Like the planet.
It's a play off of your last name, which is Marras, right?
Yes, exactly.
So it's like, if people are looking for you, if they search for Food by Mars on the internet or also on social media, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, oh my goodness, I love that Food by Mars. And it's, it's not something like totally from Mars or that you have to go to Mars.
Yeah, exactly.
You're bringing it to us here.
Yes, I'm bringing it earthbound. Let's not make this so alien, right? Like, yeah, I love it. And I also, you mentioned something too about, like with the food sensitivities. I think it's also a good reminder to remember, like you said, it's not that the gluten and the dairy and the eggs or whatever, right? Like whatever you have to remove is necessarily the villain that got you there to begin with. Okay, like sugar, gluten, yeah, definitely an issue. That is definitely an issue. But when people see like sweet potato, beans, that like things that have great nutrients and are healthy foods, but that there happen to be on their food sensitivity list, I always just like to say, like, sweet potato didn't get you into this, right? Like, that's not what this is saying. Like you said, it's saying that because you have leaky gut conditions, that's what's leaking out. And that's now what the inflammation and the antibodies are now creating. And so that's why we have these issues. And that's why we have these responses. And so we're just giving your body a break while we heal the gut. That's a thing that I always try to explain to people is eliminations alone are not going to heal you. They're simply removing that noise, removing that inflammation while you heal. So while you focus on the nutrient dense foods, the broths, the organ meats, hopefully you're working with a practitioner to help you with, key issues that your body needs, like specific nutrients, supplements, if something needs to be eradicated, like an overgrowth or a parasite or something, so that you can be healing while all of that is now calmed down, you're getting things into check, and then you start introducing. So I'm a big proponent for reintroductions and really honoring your bioindividuality and finding your personal lifestyle.
It's such a good point because I think a lot of people end up feeling like, am I going to have to avoid these foods forever? Or they feel like they're in a very restricted diet for a long time and as if that's going to fix it all. And it's, totally. I completely agree with you. We have to put the emphasis on we're just eliminating these foods for now so that we can drop the inflammation and help you get ahead of this. Right now, it's like a vicious cycle and we're just perpetuating it by eating the foods that are inflammatory. But if we can break that pattern, right? If we can be like, let's take away the foods that are inflammatory for your body right now, heal your gut. Yep. Then it's a whole different story when you can bring those foods
into
a
new terrain. Yeah, like let's try again.
And then your immune system's not going to react. There's not going to be inflammation. Your gut bacteria now are stabilized and diverse so they can handle when you have different foods. I mean, that I had that same thing and you were sharing in your case with SIBO and everything. I went through that too over the years, SIBO and fructose intolerance and all the digestive imbalances. And so here you and I are two people saying it's possible to recover from gut issues and all of these food sensitivities. And this, what your book is doing is giving people a guide, like eat this while you're working on healing your gut so that you can then go on into your future with much more freedom with your food and your gut health, right?
Absolutely.
And your health in general.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's about having more food and more joy, not constantly restricting and taking away and hoping that fixes it. It is very much a temporary thing. And you just need that guide. You need that support and knowledge too. I feel like knowledge is power. Knowing this stuff that we're talking about. Again, had I had understood that a little bit better in the beginning, it wouldn't have just been like diet, keep going with the diets. It's like, no, like, let's just put things in perspective, and have a plan forward. So I hope that this can help.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure it's going to be a huge help for everyone who gets your book and I can't wait to get it myself so I can try out especially these cheese alternative recipes.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes people, I'm a cheese lover too. So it's like to avoid cheese is sometimes harder than avoiding gluten.
I agree. Because now there's so many other like gluten-free breads it's really like the cheese though. You just like can't nail it. And I'm not going to say it's exactly like it, but it does the job. It'll get you there.
Sometimes I find you need just something that has sort of that consistency of cheese or to put it in a place. Like if it's a salad or something like a sandwich, you just need something like,
melty or creamy.
That just gives you you can almost trick your brain that it's cheese.
Totally. Yes.
And if that can help you navigate this gut healing and autoimmune reversing process that maybe you're in, then it's worth it. It's like, okay, whatever we have to see that we're on a journey, and this is helping on this journey. So, oh my gosh, thank you so much, Alison, for coming to talk about this with me and share about your book. And I'm really excited to share this with everyone.
My pleasure. It's been so awesome talking to you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So again, everyone, look, I'll put all of Alison's information. So definitely connect with her and check out her book. And I'm so glad you all joined us for this conversation. And definitely too, you can at the when you're listening to this, whether on the podcast audio or on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe so you can hear back from me from next interviews. I'd love to hear from you and your feedback.
Thanks for listening to How Humans Heal. If you liked this episode, leave a rating and a review. And for more resources, visit drdoni.com.